But I've seen you post about that a lot, though, about like what were you doing before all this came about? Like everybody is scheming. Yeah, everybody.
You are learning our worth, and y'all are scared. So scared that the last thing y'all could do is put in law.
On mute, but I was holding still because you know my face always tells a whole story, so I was trying to act like I was frozen, but I'm really not. It's okay. So yes.
Welcome to another episode of Besties Building Brands, the podcast, where we aim to expand your network and just introduce you to our neighborhood superheroes, the people that are making a difference in our community, business owners who are, striving for success and are about building up the community like we are. So today I have a special guest. Her name is Jenny Jackson. She's a professional consultant with expertise in front-end innovation strategy and process methodology for startups and labs and incubators. So we love innovation. We love creativity. We are kind of the misfits out here. We don't fit in with the typical, girls club. So it's exciting to have her on to hear about her business, and she's also a mom of an awesome kid like I am, and some of our other guests. So we're going to bring her on. We're going to hear about her business. We're going to hear about how she maintains, and hopefully it encourages you, and you get something out of it. So let's bring her on. Hello.
Hi, Khadijah. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. How are you today?
I am good. We are at the end of the week. Cheers to Friday, right?
Yep. And it's almost the beginning of a new month. So that's always a good thing. New month, new goals. Time to knock it out of work, All right. So Jenny, we always like to have our guests introduce themselves. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and why you got started.
Yeah. So I think we all know that we have a calling. So 2014, 2015, I took a corporate role with MetLife Insurance, and by way of navigating that system, I landed in a space, innovation space. It was really all about how can we reach direct to consumer market without traditional ways of getting insurance, right? So back in the day, you get an advisor, you have an insurance agent, you pee, you give blood, and then you get a policy. But that's not how the world works today, right? Everyone wants to do stuff online. They want to be digitally native, right? You start online, you want to end online. And so in that space, I ended up with a leader, Paul Popolo, huge props to him, who really understood innovation methodology and process. And so we spent about 3 years for MetLife really exploring that space, trying to figure out how we could reach digitally native consumers, right, for insurance, which is typically stodgy and conservative. And so I spent a lot of time on what I call front-end innovation, exploring that space. We spent, months just putting together business cases just so we could test something. Might have been like a 9-day test, 3-month test to validate that it actually worked and that consumers actually wanted it.
Okay.
So, are you getting feedback, Khadijah?
No.
Okay. So after a few years in that space, the business said, okay, you guys aren't making us money. Y'all are just testing stuff. We're done, right? That happens, right? MetLife is a big conglomerate. And so after that happened, I had a lot of senior leaders like, okay, so my superpower is getting stuff done, right? The business would tell me, don't do that. Are you crazy? Are you stupid? And I've had stakeholders say that to me as a Black woman in this role. And so I would say, okay, well, I'm not asking you, I'm asking you what has to be true for it to get done. So that's been my superpower stuff done. And so these senior leaders went to other companies, other corporations, and took me with them. And so I said, okay, well, I don't want to be a full-time employee. I don't want to move to the Northeast or to out West because I've done that before. And it was not good for my mental health. It was not good for my priorities because I had small children at home. And I know we'll talk about their hyper needs here in a second. But I can help you maybe on a contractual and consulting basis. And that's what really got me into consulting space. So 2018, with my senior VP to Munich Reinsurance to help her set up her lab and define the process and methodology around innovation there, right? Business innovation. And then I had a partner who I worked with at MetLife out west who said, okay, teach me how to work at big companies. I'm a startup. I spent some time with him there. And so a lot of times in the consulting space, you have about 2 or 3 years best, right? That's your runway to really get in and make some money. 2018, 2019, 6-figure years, great years. And then 2020, we all know what happened, right?
Right.
The pandemic hit. I am the single primary income earner for my home. Small children, elementary school, one actually transitioned to middle school. And so I had to stop working. And so I stopped consulting or contracting to really, help them get through being in virtual learning. And so that was 2020. Somehow, by the grace of God, we made it through. Don't know how to this day. We made it, right?
Yeah.
And then 2021 comes around, and those same partners who I've been working with come back and help me. And so truly by the strength of timing and, God and everything else that's happening in that space, I've been able to continue, right, and sustain entrepreneurship as a consultant in a very unique space. The difference between what I was doing in 2018 and 2019, I was helping folks at kind of these large companies, Northeast, West. I've gotten to the Charlotte ecosystem, Charlotte, North Carolina. And so 2021 and 2022, I've been taking on more advisory roles. I've been working with the local accelerators here, working with the local universities here who were clients again in the past, but not my larger clients. And so I've re-engaged with those relationships and really taken on more of advisory type work. And so that's how I got here.
Yeah, what you said that I love is it sounds like I'm hearing that it's the networking. Your network has allowed you to sustain, has allowed you to grow. You still maintain those connections. So once, you were able to get your children set up with the virtual schooling, you still were able to reach out. And I think that's so important. That's why, our motto is expand your network, because a lot of times your network is what's going to help you to get to that next level. It's not always about your education. It's not even always about your skill. Sometimes it's really about just who you know and the connections that you make along the way. So I love that. But let's start from the beginning, before all of that. Like, did you know that this is something that you wanted to do when you wanted to get older? A lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. Like, what did you want to do?
And my mom was a teacher, like hardcore. We're from South Carolina, hardcore 30, 40 years in the Charleston County school system. So again, that's my role model, right? Growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. And then I think that transitioned to like choreography, right? So I've always had, a liberal spirit, kind of artistic spirit. As I got older, that manifested into like graphic design work. So I'm a, Zennial. Like between Gen X, Gen Y, I spent a lot of time in what we call desktop publishing in high school. So my mom she was a director of a daycare. And so the lady that run the subway next door said, can you put together a nice sheet for me, for my wedding album, right? So I would go on and design those things. I would do stuff for the daycare. At the time, we called it desktop publishing. And then I said, okay, well, I want to do this professionally as a graphic designer. So I am an Aggie born, Aggie bred, went to A&T. Last year, 1999, came in the 90s, left 2004, had a little bit too much fun. My curriculum was graphic design, graphic communications, as we called it, industrial technology. And then when I really got into the weeds, I said, well, I don't really like doing it. I like output, but I don't like the input. It's too much. And so I said, okay. And I came out of school. I think a lot of us end up in workplaces that have nothing to do with our undergraduate degree. And so I left Greensboro, ended up in Charlotte. Actually, I'll take a step back. In Greensboro, I worked for the city of Greensboro. And so I ran kind of this JTPAs, what you called it back in the day, like the work study program for teens, at-risk teens. And so I revamped the program for training and professional services there, ran my course there. I ended up in like HR, that type of sector. And so after I left Greensboro, I said, okay, well, I want to do this professionally. Let me go back and get a degree, an advanced degree. So that's what brought me to Charlotte. I ended up going to Queen's University of Charlotte. Ended up with a Master of Science in Organization Development. And then again, by way of what was available at the time, like, was pregnant and at grad school. My son's 13 now. Later on, obviously found out that he had some developmental issues. And, it's a higher needs child. But I ended up in insurance, Allstate, and their direct center. Did not choose it, but that was available at the time. And then I worked my way up. I was a training supervisor. I helped people transition from the classroom to the actual production floor in a contact center. And then I helped with strategy execution. And I said, okay, well, I've got this advanced degree. I've got the experience. Let me see what else is out there. So one of my peers, shout out to Kim, brought me a listing for MetLife. They had a leadership development program. And so for leadership development, if folks aren't familiar in corporate, you're typically taking a rotational role 3 to 5 years each year, right? And you're transitioning from one city to the other or from one city to the other. So I was like, oh, I'm a small child at home, but I'm going to go, right? Hoping that we would go together, but it didn't work out, for Kim or, whatever she had in her career path. And so I went. And so I ended up going in New Jersey, Somerset, New Jersey for a year and a half. And I worked out of the New York office for MetLife. And so I would be on the train, right? Driving it, on the train. My child's in school. I was expecting another child this time, crying. And I'm not lying. 7 a.m. My newborn daughter was at daycare. My son was at school. I would go into New Brunswick, right, where Rutgers is, catch the train, and I'd be on the train crying because my kids were in school. And
listen, it's a lot of our stories are like that. A lot of us have those same kind of stories.
Crying on the train, right? And so I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it. I would go, I would do it, because I would do this better, right? My thinking was go to the Northeast, lock in the salary, lock in the relationships, and then come back Southeast and you have that lock in. And so again, by nature of timing and what was happening with the company, they opened up a new department called Direct to Consumer, all focused on the consumer, right? And so I ended up in New York for about a year, New Jersey, New York, about a year and a half. And then there was a role that came up, innovation role. And so I applied and I got it. So I was able to leave that leadership program and come back to Charlotte, which is where I was originally. And so that's what I came back and got that skill set going.
I'm trying to tell you, I remember being pregnant with my twins, who are both, they're moderately autistic. But I remember walking home because we didn't have a car, it was cold, and I didn't want to wait for the bus. So I walked from the trolley. So it might have been these 5 long blocks, and I just used to be crying because I was in pain. Babies were heavy. But you know what I did? I used to listen to podcasts. So I would listen to Tyler Perry and Oprah and just listen to their stories. And it just really was okay, it's not that bad. You're living, these people lived in, their cars for 3 years. And it just motivated me not only to help me realize that it's bad, but it could be worse, but also that it's going to get better. So just listening to you tell that part of your story and to see where you are now, that's why I like to start from the beginning, because a lot of times people see your now and they don't see what you had to go through for the 10 years prior, all the tears, all the, the struggle. So I love that for you. How old are your children?
So I have a 13-year-old. My 13-year-old is autistic, and I would say moderately autistic. His activity of daily living is off the chart. That boy can go in, get himself dressed, make his lunch because food is his thing, make his sister's lunch. But I think what we find is that, there are challenges, right? And so his developmental challenge is really more social emotional. There's something that ticks me off or triggers me, and I don't really know how to deal with it, right? And so that's where he's been in kind of the cycle, over the past few years. And then you add more developmental issues as they kind of hit puberty. So now it's not just autism. It could be tics and Tourette's and, other things that kind of layer in. And as I study more, I find that those disorders typically all go together. Right. And so you're going to or if you're anything like me, you're in these groups. And so you find, and they're like, oh, my child had this issue before this happened. My child too. So why, there's a trend there, right? They had infections, they had these, skin disorders, led to XYZ. Why isn't science and medicine there yet?
Yeah, I'm new. I'm a new autism mom. The twins are 3, and they were really sick for like the first 2 years of their life. They're actually, I don't want to say they're sickly, but they get sick a lot. And so for the first 2 years, I kind of really didn't know. And the doctor kind of was like, okay, they're twins. You had them early. They're probably going to be delayed till they're about 2. So I'm like, okay, so I didn't think anything until they were about 2. And I'm like, okay, so they're delayed, but are they still delayed? And then they were sick. So the groups help me, but sometimes they are, it's kind of disheartening in a way because, when you have a baby, you kind of have an idea of how you want their life to go in a sense, like, okay, they're going to go to high school, they're going to graduate. But then when somebody tells you, okay, or give you a diagnosis, whatever that may be, it doesn't necessarily have to be autism. Now you're like, well, maybe the kid's going to have to live with me forever. What's going to happen if I'm not here?
Yes.
How can I go to work? Like, I can't go to work. Like, I have 2 of them. They can't talk. So they can't tell me, you know what I mean? So being an entrepreneur, I have to. Because I have to be able to take care of my babies. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Even if it's, part of the day. So how do you manage? He's 13 now, so you have way more experience than me. So
I do.
Please.
Yes. And so what we will find, and everyone's track is different. What I found is like, you have these sweet spots, these honeymoon spots where your child is perfect. Your children are perfect, right? They're doing well. And then you hit like a seasonal change or something happens and something changes. And then they have these of like a month or 2 or 3 where everything is just chaos. What I have learned entrepreneurship is that I can control my days. That's the biggest piece. And it took me a while to realize that. I had a friend, she's a therapist. And she said, well, what if you just take Monday and that's like a planning day and you don't put a lot of stress on yourself or, a lot of pressure. I was like, oh, I can do that. So now, again, those first 2 years were about money, 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 get the income, keep the relationships. But I was wearing myself out, right? And I think as an independent worker, and in your case, even you may like outsource like a small task here or there, right? But what I found is that if I controlled my week based on what I had going on, that made me feel empowered. So Monday and Tuesday are like my days. So I may take 1 or 2 meetings. Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday are open calendar days because I weigh what's happening at home. The children are at school, a child may be with, a family member. That gives me more flexibility on those days. And so that's what I started doing is really taking it back to my week and saying, okay, I don't have to be available every single day of the week. This is what my availability is and what my work schedule is. And this is how I'm scaling the work that I have available. And that's what's helped me tremendously in this space.
Do you have a lot of support from your family?
It's hard. So my parents are traditionalists. My mom is 82 years old. She's in South Carolina, so I can't leave my children with her. She's 82. I have a centralized family here. I'm in Charlotte. My niece and nephews are here. My sister is here. But again, I can kind of decide who goes with who when based on what I know about personality types and who can kind of deal with some of the issues. And so that has been helpful. That's given me the breaks that I need throughout the week with my children. But at the end of the day, they're a mom, right? And they're home and they're maybe having a meltdown or a breakdown. I should add that my daughter, she's 8. She's got some hyper needs also in terms of ADHD. Back in the day, like, ADHD children they take Ritalin, they're hyper. It's like so much more than that, right? And so what's interesting is though my younger child does not have, I say she's neurodiverse because she does have some hyper needs, but not to the degree that my son does. But at the same point in time, it's like my son just has activities of daily living that she doesn't have. And so where he's strong, she's not, and vice versa.
Having support is so important, but it's also difficult when your child has higher needs. I like the way you put that. We just did an autism awareness and advocacy virtual event, and it was so good. And I want to keep having conversations around that because for a child that, quote unquote typical child, you might can get somebody to babysit your child. But if your child eats shit, like mine does, one of the twins, nobody really wants to deal with that. Or, just the tantrums, or, I'm fearful of, you need to beat them. You know what I mean?
That's our community, Khadijah. Back in the day, it was a little crazy, slap them a little bit, to get them. And I struggle with that so much, because I'm not going to discipline my child because they're stimming. I'm not going to discipline my child because they have a meltdown. If I know they can't control their body and what's happening, I'm not going to discipline that. And where we get into aggression and being physical, I think there's ways of restraining and dealing with that. And more perfect. But at the same point in time, you cannot beat a disability, or you cannot beat a developmental issue out of a child. You just can't.
And honestly, to be honest with you, I will pop them a little bit, but it's not like, if you have other children, I have 6 children, they're my youngest, and you can see the difference immediately. So if I pop my older children when they were 2 or 3, it's kind of, eventually they're like, okay, let me stop. That's hot. I don't want to touch it. Right. If you do that to a child that is, on the autism spectrum or has higher needs, they don't care. They don't care that it's hot. So touching it and it being hot, they don't care. They'll keep burning themselves. And then 2, now they go stop, and they so they don't understand. So, I think that, and I don't know if it's just our community, there are some resources out there, but we don't talk about it enough, and there's not enough out there for people of color to really understand and to break the stigma of beat them, put them on punishment, do this, do that, and to understand that our children can have a disability, our children can have anxiety, our children can be stressed. I had to, learn it earlier on in my parenting journey. I didn't get that. I was the depress those dishes kind of mom. You know what I mean? But now it's you kids can be depressed, but you learn that from your parents, and they got it from their parents. You know what I mean?
And and I don't fault our parents, because they had to survive, right? Mm-hmm. They had to survive. They had to find the way to do it. But I think our generations are becoming more hyper aware. These are real issues. I think our non-people of color peers growing up, I saw it all the time. Oh, don't talk to so-and-so, or don't push his buttons because it pisses him off and it could send them into a spiral. Well, guess what? Our kids are too. And so that's why I do rely heavily on the IEP. I do rely heavily on the supports, because my little Black girl that is having, social emotional issues because she can't regulate what's happening here, you're going to give her the same supports. You're sorry.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But I do agree. And I was thinking about our discussion even before the podcast. I do think that, again, by nature of who we are and how we grew up, physical discipline is how we beat stuff out of them. And even older folks, more mature folks in our families say so and so is a little touched, right? So and so is a little touched, they'll grow out of it. Well, you know what? Nobody grows out of autism. Nobody grows out of these issues. They learn how to mature into them. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to learn is that children who are autistic become autistic adults, and autistic adults look very different than autistic children.
Yes. And so what we were trying to do, Besties, we have a nonprofit, and we have a lot of different social initiatives. One being autism, the spectrum as a whole, meaning we want to find respite care for mothers, because I feel like there's not, like I said earlier, if you have a child that's doing things like, the pico and they're having the tantrums, it's hard to find somebody to watch them. And even if you do, you may not feel comfortable. And then where you want to go, you don't have anywhere that you can really go. A lot of times, from what I see in the group, they're single moms, they're struggling, they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. They can't really work a traditional job because they keep getting called up to the school. And so they're so stressed out, but there's nowhere for moms to go. So your child has an IEP, they have therapists, but what do you have for moms? So one of the things we're trying to do is to really have respite care for moms, even if it's a day. even if it's for a few hours. And then with that, we want to have like a sensory room, somewhere you can come with your child.
Yes.
The child is okay. So you know that your child is okay. You can relax. Your child is right next door. That's one of the things we want to do.
Yes.
And when you mentioned how autistic children become autistic adults, I want to put a program together where we're teaching them technical skills, whether it be coding, things that they are probably already good at, where they don't need to do a lot of social interaction, but they can make a living and that they can take care of themselves.
Yes.
And that they can be self-sufficient and they don't always have to push the cart back at Walmart. They can do more than that.
Yes.
So that
builds confidence, right?
Yeah.
To your point, that builds confidence because again, they become autistic adults. You deserve a life worth living, regardless of what it is. And so the same way we mature as typically developing people, neurodiverse individuals deserve to mature the same way.
Yeah, and so I'm determined to do that. A lot of our other initiatives are surrounded around our seniors, our men. We have a lot of things that we're trying to do in the community. But I think it starts with conversations like these. Just being real. A lot of times in those groups, I find that sometimes they're they don't motivate me because a lot of times it's like, my child is 23 and he's still doing X, Y, and Z. It doesn't, and I know it's a place to vent, but it's not really too many, happy endings or success stories. And I know that they're out there. And even if they aren't, we need to start making more. So we need to figure out what we can do to make sure that our babies are okay. We can't live forever.
No.
And we have to make sure we're okay.
What I find, Khadijah, is there's two kind of parallels. One is like, my child is dependent on me and he's going to be dependent on me and I don't want anything more for him for the rest of his life. And then one is, I want him to live independently. I want him to live on his own and or with roommates and have a life worth living. And so you have to decide. I don't think either one is wrong or right? You have to, depending on what your child's needs are. My personal goal for my son, because I see what he can do, is I want him to live independently or co-independently, right? He's going to have the supports as he gets older. In order for that to happen, you have to give your child the ability to go out and do those things. My child is 13. I leave him at home by himself for an hour at a time because I know he can do that, right? Some people aren't comfortable doing that with their children, especially if they have hyper needs or higher needs. And so that's okay. In order for him to learn how to be at home by himself, learn how to get up and get himself a drink or eat, you have to allow him to do it. He's not going to learn without that space. You're going to learn one of two things. He can't do it or he can. If he can't do it, you make accommodations. If he can, maybe you add 30 minutes here or there.
Yeah, you know what? I struggle with that because I was feeding them, and like when I would go to therapy, they would be like, "So can they feed themselves?" I'm like, "No, not yet." But I'm like, "Did I ever try? Let me get them a spoon in the bowl."
Yeah,
of course, and of course the bowl is on their head, and they're doing. But eventually, they get it. They get it in their mouth, and I'm like, "If you get it in your mouth, it's cool." But you kind of tend to hold on tighter. Like, okay, wait a minute. I have to be overprotective. So I love that. And I really want to just help women, mothers, and you don't have to be a single mom, but just with their business. You know what I mean? Because again, it's hard to go into a 9-to-5 and they're calling you because your child's having a tantrum.
So let me tell you about that. So ladies, men, whoever you are, take your FMLA. So there is FMLA where you can take time off, but there's also contingent FMLA that people don't realize. So your doctor can write up something that says that your child has flare-ups. You have to leave to deal with it. It's contingent. It's as needed. And so that's what I did in my first corporate role at Allstate. And I had a very supportive leader. Josiah's having a flare-up. I've got to go get him, take him to maybe his dad or whoever, and then I'll be back at work. I have to come in late. And you write it up every time it happens and to HR. That's what it's there for. The other FMLA is obviously what we talk about, the longer term. I need to take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months because my child is having a crisis. And so what I will say in retrospect, some leaders don't like that. So a very personal story. I went back to FMLA when I got into my corporate role at MetLife. And I said, look, my son is in crisis. Like, I need to be able to take him to camp, take this time off to do whatever. He didn't like that. I had a boomer boss. I still love him to this day. So he said to me, you leave when you need to and come in when you need to, but you don't need to do FMLA. Mm-hmm. He said that, right? And I had no record of it, but I trusted him, and so I did it. And he kept, he was true to his word. However, if he wasn't true to his word, or if there was another issue, I would not have been protected. Right. Against his. Right. Yeah. So you do what you feel is right in your spirit, but it's to use. Teams got to be able to move on. Employers have to be able to move on with or without you. Right. That's what these systems are set up for. But use those systems that are in place, like FMLA, to support you and what's going on with your family.
Yeah, that's important. Use your PTO time, use your FMLA, and then like you were saying, like you can stay at your job and then they can decide the next day, okay, thank you for your service, but we don't need you anymore. And now you're like, you know what I mean? So tell us where they can find you, how you can help our businesses and our business owners.
Yes. So I am at jjcreatives.com. I do consult. So my goal, right, I want to scale. I want to help the individual market. So right now I'm helping a lot of labs and incubators, a lot of accelerators. Again, just by nature of my network and what I'm doing. Network is the net worth. However, my goal is to go out and start helping the independent small business owners. If you go to my website, you can start an hour with me, consulting time. I'll give you input on how to develop your idea, how to test it quickly, how to essentially take it to market, and then resources that are out there in the community that are maybe accelerators or larger platforms where you can go and learn more about how to maybe take your idea to the next level. And so that's my sweet spot. I am not advanced innovation. I'll tell you what I'm not. I will not help you with your profit and loss documents. I will not help you, if you're in a kind of a mature business model. I am all about, I have an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea. Tell me how I can test it. Tell me if people want it, how I can validate that people want it, and then what I can do after I've done that so that I can actually take it to market. And so that's my spot.
I love that. And so we have a special Besties link for you. I'll make sure I'll put that on the screen and send it out to everyone watching. And then keep in mind that Besties Media, we are looking for more podcast guests. We also offer other media services, social media management. We do all the animated videos and a host of other services. And our nonprofit, we're just out here for the community. Our principles are based on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. One of our main focuses is group economics. So we are about networking. We are about growing together. And we actually have a club that we're starting for the women misfits. Not, this isn't the typical, Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, women empowerment, $20,000 convention groups. This is for the women who really want to make a change. So you can find that information on our website, bestiesbusiness.org. You can join the club, get 2 months for free, and it's $50 a month after that. And we're getting jackets, so we're going to be like a really cool gang. We're going to be cute. And I meant to mention too that I'm also a licensed insurance agent. I kind of put that down for a while, but I feel like with the diagnosis I had with my twins, it kind of made me say, okay, I need more insurance. I need to make sure that my kids are okay if I'm no longer here, even more so than my other children, because I might need to make sure that they have long-term care. So keep a lookout for that.
Those siblings are important. And I know, no one really asked to be born into those situations, but SIBs are so important for the development of your younger children and then also for the future. I would say I've had a very transparent conversation with my 8-year-old early on. Like, this is your brother. This is who he is. He's going to need you as he gets older. I think that's important to have.
Yeah, to foster that community within your own home, to make sure that, listen, mommy won't be here. You got to make sure. But for that piece, I'm only working with parents of children with disabilities. we have a lot on our plate, but I just think it's something that's necessary for the community. So make sure you hit up Miss Jenny. Make sure I know a lot of you guys are startups and you want to start another stream of income, and you may not be sure if it's a good move or not. Make sure you hit her up. I'll give you a link for that, and hit us up on bestiesbusiness.org or on Facebook, social media at Besties Media. Have a good day.
Thanks, Khadijah. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.